I'm Emma Carter, 29 years old, born and raised in a sleepy little town in Ohio where everyone knows everyone else's business. Growing up, I was always the quiet kid with a sketchbook, dreaming of turning my doodles into a career as a graphic designer, but in my family, I was never the star of the show. That role belonged to my younger sister, Chloe, who's 26 now and was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. From the moment Chloe was born, it was like I faded into the background. My parents, Margaret and Thomas, couldn't stop gushing over her. She had this charm, this way of wrapping everyone around her finger with a smile. Me? I was just Emma, the one who tried too hard and got nowhere. When I brought home a certificate for winning an art contest at school, my mom barely glanced at it, muttering something about how nice it was before turning back to Chloe's latest drama. But if Chloe passed a spelling test, you'd think she'd won an Oscar. The house would light up with praise. My dad grilling steaks to celebrate while I sat in the corner, clutching my little award, invisible dot. It wasn't just words. Birthdays were the worst. Chloe got lavish parties, new phones, or sparkly dresses. I'd get a clearance rack notebook or a pair of socks my mom grabbed last minute. One year when I turned 12, I got a single card with a $5 bill inside. That same day, Chloe, who was 9, unwrapped a brand new tablet. I remember swallowing my tears, pretending it didn't hurt, while my dad said, "Chloe needs these things to keep up with her friends." I learned early on to stop expecting anything. Chloe soaked it all up, growing into someone who thought the world owed her everything. She'd bat her eyes, and my parents would hand over whatever she wanted. Meanwhile, I buried myself in my art, sketching late into the night, dreaming of a life where I didn't feel like an afterthought. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. I just wanted to be seen, to matter as much as she did. But no matter how hard I tried, I was always the shadow next to Chloe's spotlight. That's how it was, and for a long time, I thought that's how it would always be. As Chloe got older, she only leaned harder into the role of the spoiled princess. By the time she was in her early 20s, she'd met Ryan, a smooth-talking guy with a flashy smile and zero ambition. Ryan was the kind of person who could charm anyone at first, but the more you knew him, the more you saw the truth. He was a leech. He didn't have a job, didn't seem to want one, and was perfectly happy letting Chloe and my parents foot the bill for his life. The worst part? My parents, Margaret and Thomas, ate it up. They treated Ryan like he was some kind of prince, inviting him to every family dinner, even helping him and Chloe fix up their apartment when they moved in together. That apartment was another sore spot. Chloe and Ryan lived in a cozy place my parents practically paid for, covering the deposit and helping with rent whenever Chloe batted her eyes. My mom would spend hours there, cleaning, cooking, making sure Chloe's life was perfect. Meanwhile, I could count on one hand the number of times they'd visited me after I moved to Columbus to chase my career as a graphic designer. Every time I did come home, I felt like a guest in my own family. Ryan would dominate the conversation, bragging about some vague business idea he'd never follow through on, while Chloe hung on his arm, giggling. My parents would nod along, beaming as if I wasn't even in the room. I decided early on to keep my distance. After college, I threw myself into my work, building a name for myself in Columbus's design scene. I took on every freelance gig I could, from logos for small businesses to posters for local bands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. I'd call home occasionally, hoping for a real conversation, but it always ended the same way. My mom rushing off to help Chloe with something, or my dad muttering about how busy they were with family stuff. Family stuff that never seemed to include me. The more I saw how Chloe and Ryan took advantage of my parents, the more I pulled away. I didn't want to be part of that cycle, begging for scraps of attention while they fawned over my sister and her freeloading boyfriend. So I built my own life, one where I didn't need their approval. But deep down, I still hoped one day they'd see me, really see me, for who I was. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. For me, that curveball came during a brutal economic downturn that hit Columbus hard. I'd been scraping by as a freelance graphic designer, juggling multiple clients to keep my tiny apartment. But one by one, my contracts dried up. A big project I'd banked on a branding campaign for a local startup fell through when the company folded. Suddenly, I was staring at a bank account that couldn't cover next month's rent. I tried everything, pitching to new clients, cutting every expense, even skipping meals to stretch my savings. But it wasn't enough. I got the eviction notice a week after my 28th birthday. Desperate, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my parents. I sat in my half-empty apartment, heart-pounding, and dialed my mom's number. When she picked up, I poured out everything, losing my clients, the eviction, how I just needed a place to stay for a few months until I got back on my feet. I wasn't asking for money, just a corner of their house, maybe the old couch in the basement. There was a long pause, and then my mom laughed, sharp and cold, like I'd told a bad joke. "Emma, the house is full," she said. "Chloe and Ryan are going through a lot right now. We can't take on another person." I heard Ryan's voice in the background, smug as ever. "Time to grow up, Emma. The real world's tough." My dad didn't even get on the phone. I hung up, hands shaking, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me, with nowhere else to turn. I used my last $2,000 to buy a beat-up old van from a sketchy online ad. It was a rusty, creaking thing, but it was all I could afford. That van became my home. I'd park in Walmart lots or quiet side streets, praying no one would notice. I learned to shower at a cheap gym, brush my teeth in gas station bathrooms, and charge my phone at coffee shops where I'd nurse a single cup for hours. Winter nights were the worst. I'd pile on every piece of clothing I owned, wrap myself in a thin blanket, and still shiver until dawn. Summer was just as bad, waking up drenched in sweat before the sun even rose. The hardest part wasn't the cold or the heat. It was the looks people gave me when I climbed out of that van, disgust, pity, like I was less than human. I'd catch my reflection in a store window, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, and barely recognize myself. There were moments I wanted to give up, to crawl back to my parents' house and beg for a bed, even if it meant enduring Chloe's smirks and Ryan's taunts. But every time I pictured their faces, that smug certainty that I'd fail, I gripped the van's steering wheel and told myself, no, I'd rather live like this than let them win. I kept applying for jobs, sending out portfolios to anyone who'd book. I'd sit in libraries using free Wi-Fi, tweaking my designs until my eyes burned. Rejection after rejection came, each one a punch to the gut, but I didn't stop. I practiced. My pitch, forced myself to smile brighter, to stand taller. I wasn't just fighting for a job. I was fighting for my life, for the chance to prove I was more than the shadow my family saw. Living in that rusty van taught me how to survive on next to nothing, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let my story end in a parking lot. I kept pushing, sending out job applications between shifts at coffee shops and late-night design sessions in public libraries. I must have applied to 100 places, ad agencies, print shops, even random startups looking for a logo on the cheap. Most didn't even bother to reply. The ones that did sent polite rejections, saying they needed someone with more experience. I was starting to wonder if I'd ever get a break. Then, one humid afternoon in September, I got a call from a small advertising firm in Akron. The hiring manager, a gruff woman named Linda, said she'd seen my portfolio online and liked my style. She didn't care that I'd been out of work or that my address was technically a 1998 Dodge van. She just wanted someone who could deliver. I drove to the interview in my least wrinkled clothes, heart pounding, and somehow convinced her I was worth a shot. The pay was barely enough to cover gas and food, but to me, it was a lifeline. I threw myself into that job like it was my only reason to exist. I'd show up early, stay late, take on extra tasks designing flyers, mocking up websites, even organizing the office supply closet. Every paycheck I saved like my life depended on it. No eating out, no new clothes, just peanut butter sandwiches and secondhand shoes. At night, I'd crawl back into my sweltering van, exhausted but determined. I had a vision, a house of my own, a place no one could take away. After a year of grinding, I started looking at houses. Most were way out of my budget, but then I found a tiny 2-bedroom place in the suburbs of Akron. The listing showed a sagging porch, peeling paint, and a yard choked with weeds. It wasn't much, but to me it was everything. The price was $85,000, more than I'd ever dreamed of spending. I scraped together every penny I'd saved for a down payment, worked out a loan with the bank, and held my breath as they reviewed my application. When they approved me, I could barely believe it. A manageable interest rate, a payment plan I could handle. It felt like a miracle. The day I got the keys, I walked into that empty house alone, my footsteps echoing on the creaky wooden floors. I was carrying nothing but a backpack and an old sleeping bag. I dropped to my knees in the middle of the bare living room, clutching the keys so hard they dug into my palm, and I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd shed in the van, but big, messy sobs of relief and pride. This was mine. No one had handed it to me. I'd earned every inch of it with my own hands, my own fight. I ran my fingers along the chipped walls, whispering to myself, I did it. I have a home. I parked my old van in the backyard, not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me where I'd started. Every time I looked out the window and saw its rusty frame, I felt a quiet strength. I'd survived the worst days of my life. For the first time, sorry to first time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. I hadn't even had time to settle into my new house when trouble came knocking. I was still sleeping on an air mattress, eating off paper plates, and savoring the quiet of my own space. One Saturday morning, while I was scrubbing the kitchen floor, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened the door a crack and froze. There they were, my parents, Margaret and Thomas, with Chloe and Ryan standing behind them, arms crossed like they'd already decided they belonged here. My stomach twisted. I knew this wasn't a friendly visit. My mom pushed past me without a word, her eyes scanning the living room like she was appraising it. Chloe followed, tossing her hair while Ryan flopped onto my secondhand couch, stretching out like he owned it. My dad lingered by the door, avoiding my gaze. Well, Emma, my mom said after a long, heavy silence, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. This place is awfully big for just you, don't you think? I clenched my fists, feeling the air grow thick with tension. Chloe smirked, adding, Yeah, what's a single girl need with all this space? You must get lonely. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you want? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ryan leaned forward, his grin sharp. Look, we're in a tight spot. Chloe and I could use a place like this. You still got that van out back, right? You're used to roughing it. My mom nodded as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. It's only fair, Emma. Chloe and Ryan need a stable home. You can manage. I stared at them, a wave of rage and disbelief crashing over me. Where were they when I was sleeping in a parking lot, scraping by on nothing? When I begged for a corner of their house, they laughed in my face. Now, because I clawed my way out of that hole, they thought they could just take what I built? No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. This is my house. You don't get to decide what I do with it. Chloe's face twisted. You're so selfish, Emma, she snapped, stepping closer. We're your family. You're gonna let us struggle while you sit here in this big house all alone? My dad finally spoke, his voice low and cold. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my mom, hoping for a shred of fairness, but she just stared back, silently siding with Chloe. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. Before I could respond, Chloe lunged forward and slapped me hard across the face. The sting burned, my head snapping to the side. That's what you deserve for turning your back on us, she screamed, her eyes wild. I touched my cheek, the pain sharp, but nothing compared to the years of hurt I'd swallowed. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and spoke clearly. I need the police. I've been assaulted, and there are intruders in my home. The second they heard, police, their bravado crumbled. Ryan jumped up, muttering excuses. My mom's face went pale, her hands twisting nervously. Chloe tried to backtrack, stammering, You're overreacting. But I held the phone steady, my eyes locked on them. Leave my house now, or you can explain it to the cops. The police arrived in minutes. I showed them the security footage from my front door camera every moment, from their uninvited entrance to Chloe's slap. The officers didn't hesitate. They ordered my family to leave immediately. My mom shot me a look of bitter disappointment, like I was the one betraying them. I didn't care. They'd abandoned me long ago. I thought that was the end of it, but I underestimated them. 3 days later, after a long day at work, I came home to find my front door lock changed. Strange furniture was crammed into my living room, Chloe's. Tacky decor, Ryan's old recliner. My van had been dragged to the curb like trash. I banged on the door, fury boiling inside me. Chloe opened it, smirking like she'd won. What are you doing here, Emma? She said, her voice sickeningly sweet. This is our house now. Ryan stepped forward, waving a stack of papers. We've got a lease agreement signed by you. It's legal." I snatched the papers, my heart racing. The signature was a clumsy forgery, nothing like mine. It was almost laughable how bad they were at this. "You're delusional," I said, pulling out my phone again. I called the police, gave my address, and reported intruders. Chloe's smirk faltered as she slammed the door in my face. I sat on the porch steps, clutching my phone, my anger like a fire keeping me warm. This was my house, paid for with sleepless nights, skipped meals, and every ounce of my strength. No one, not even. My own blood was taking it from me. When the police arrived, I showed them the security footage. Chloe and Ryan breaking the lock, hauling in their junk, and installing a new one. I handed over my driver's license to compare with their fake lease. The signature didn't match. The the officers didn't need to hear more. They ordered Chloe and Ryan to pack up and leave or face arrest for trespassing and forgery. Chloe burst into tears, clinging to an officer's arm, but it didn't work. Ryan's face turned red, his excuses falling flat. I watched, silent, as they dragged their belongings out, their defeat written in every angry step. After the police forced Chloe and Ryan out of my house, I thought I'd finally won some peace. I changed the locks, reinforced my security cameras, and tried to settle back into my routine. But the anger and hurt lingered like a bruise that wouldn't fade. I kept replaying everything: my parents' cold dismissal, Chloe's slap, Ryan's smug grin, wondering why my family had always treated me like I didn't matter. Then, about a week later, an unexpected letter arrived that turned my world upside down. It was from a lawyer in town, someone I'd never heard of. The letter was formal, typed on crisp paper, and it said my grandmother, who'd passed away when I was a kid, had left a small inheritance for me. It wasn't much, a few $1,000s from an old savings account, but my parents had never told me about it. Instead, they'd taken the money and used it to support Chloe, paying for her car, her clothes, even part of her apartment with Ryan. The lawyer explained that he'd only recently discovered the oversight while reviewing old estate files. My grandmother had wanted me to have something of my own, but my parents had buried it. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands, piecing it together. The favoritism wasn't just random. My mom, Margaret, had always been protective of Chloe, but I'd never known why. The lawyer's letter mentioned a detail I'd been too young to understand. When Chloe was a toddler, she'd been dangerously ill, hospitalized for months with a rare condition. My parents had lived in fear of losing her, and that fear shaped everything. They poured all their love, their resources into Chloe, as if making up for those terrifying days. My inheritance, meant for me, became another way to keep her comfortable. I was stunned, not just by the betrayal, but by the clarity it brought. All those years of feeling invisible, of wondering why I wasn't enough, it wasn't my fault. It was their guilt, their fear, twisted into a dynamic that left me on the outside. Part of me wanted to confront them, to demand the money back, to scream about the unfairness. But as I stared at the letter, I realized something else. I didn't need that money anymore. I'd built my life without it, without them. Still, I knew I had to face them, not for revenge, but to lay the truth bare and finally move on. Holding that lawyer's letter, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. For years, I'd swallowed my pain, letting my family's lies shape the story of our lives, but no more. I sat down at my laptop, hands still shaky from the revelation about my grandmother's inheritance, and started typing. I poured it all out on a public Facebook post for our extended family and old friends to see. I wrote about being kicked out when I was homeless, my parents' cold laughter when I begged for help, Chloe and Ryan trying to steal my house with a forged lease, and now the hidden inheritance my parents had taken from me to prop up Chloe's life. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I just laid out the truth, raw and unfiltered, and attached proof. The lawyer's letter, screenshots of my security footage, the police reports, even a side-by-side of the fake lease signature next to my real one. At the end, I wrote, "I'm done being invisible. This is my story, and I'm telling it now." I hit post and braced myself. Within hours, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Comments poured in, some from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, others from old neighbors who'd always thought my family was picture perfect. "I had no idea, Emma." One aunt wrote, "You didn't deserve this." People were shocked, angry, and a few even shared their own memories of seeing me sidelined while Chloe was put on a pedestal. The post spread like wildfire through our small Ohio town where gossip travels faster than the wind. The fallout hit my family hard. Chloe and Ryan, once the untouchable golden couple, became pariahs. People stopped inviting them to barbecues, and whispers followed them at the grocery store. Ryan, who'd always relied on his charm, couldn't handle the shame. When it came out that Chloe had been blowing through his money on shopping sprees, he packed a bag and left town, leaving her with nothing but a pile of credit card bills. Chloe tried to move back in with my parents, but even they were different now. Margaret and Thomas, humiliated by the public exposure, barely spoke to her. They'd spent years enabling her, but now they were stuck in a cramped house, drowning in their own regret and the town's judgment. Chloe's life unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Without Ryan's support or my parents' endless handouts, she was forced to face reality. She posted vague, dramatic rants online about betrayal and family loyalty, but no one bought it. The evidence I'd shared was too clear, too damning. Friends she'd once bragged to turn their backs, and job applications went nowhere once employers heard about her reputation. She was alone, stuck, and for the first time, she had no one to bail her out. I'd expected to feel triumph, maybe even a little satisfaction watching it all collapse. But instead, there was just a hollow ache. I didn't hate Chloe or my parents. I just wanted them to see me, to acknowledge the hurt they'd caused. The truth was out now, and it had cost them everything: their reputation, their relationships, their perfect little facade. But for me, it was the first step towards something I'd never had. A voice, a chance to stand tall and say, "This is who I am, and I'm not invisible anymore." After the truth came out, I braced myself for silence. I figured my family would double down, painting me as the villain to save face, but life has a way of surprising you. One quiet morning in June, as I was watering the wildflowers I planted in my backyard, an old sedan pulled up in front of my house. My heart sank when I saw my parents, Margaret and Thomas, step out, followed by Chloe. They looked different, smaller, somehow like the weight of their mistakes had carved new lines into their faces. Chloe clutched a small paper bag, her eyes fixed on the ground. I stood there, arms crossed, unsure whether to let them in or send them away. My mom spoke first, her voice soft and unsteady. "Emma, we owe you an apology." I was so wrong, pouring everything into Chloe because of what happened when she was little. I thought I was protecting her, but I hurt you instead. "I'm so sorry." My dad, who'd never been one for words, cleared his throat. "I failed you, Emma. I see that now. If there's any chance to make it right, I want to try." Chloe stepped forward, her hands trembling as she handed me the bag. "I was awful to you," she said, barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm trying to change. I got a job at a diner. It's not much, but it's a start." Inside the bag was a handmade card, Chloe's messy handwriting scrawled across it. "I hope one day I can be a sister you're proud of." I stared at it, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to throw their apologies back in their faces, to let out all the hurt I carried for years. But another part, quieter but stronger, was just tired. I'd fought so hard to build this life, to find peace. I didn't need revenge anymore. I needed to move forward. "Okay," I said finally, my voice thick. "But this doesn't erase everything. It'll take time and I need boundaries." They nodded, almost in unison, like they'd expected nothing less. From that day, things shifted, slowly. Chloe started texting me about her job, small updates about her life. My mom would send pictures of her garden, little gestures that felt genuine. My dad, still not much for talking, would drop off homemade bread on my porch, leaving without a word. I stayed cautious. Scars don't vanish overnight, but I could see they were trying. I started building a new life in my little house I rented out the spare bedroom to a college student named Mia, who was studying art and filled the place with her quirky sketches. The extra income covered most of my mortgage, and for the first time I felt financially steady. I threw myself back into my design work, taking on bigger clients, but I also made time for myself. I'd host painting nights in my backyard, inviting Mia and a few new friends from work. We'd laugh, sip cheap wine, and cover canvases with wild colors under the stars. One evening, as I stood in my yard watching the sunset glint off my old van, I felt something settle inside me. This house wasn't just a roof over my head. It was proof of everything I'd overcome. My family was trying to change, and I was open to it, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd found my own peace, my own people, my own way. And that was enough. Standing on my porch one crisp fall evening, watching the warm glow of my living room spill out through the windows, I realized something. My story isn't just about surviving a family that turned their backs on me. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. I went from sleeping in a rusty van, feeling like I was nothing, to holding the keys to my own home. I faced betrayal, fought for what was mine, and learned that peace isn't about fixing the past, it's about building a future you're proud of. My family's trying to change, and I'm open to it, but I don't need their validation anymore. This house, these walls, the life I've made, it's all proof that I'm enough. If you're out there feeling invisible or stuck in a toxic situation, know this: you can rebuild. It's hard, it's messy, but it's possible. Your story isn't over. Keep going, keep fighting, and one day you'll find your own kind of peace, just like I did.